Meow, 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 meow. Everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey everyone, Cantonese Cat here. We'll talk about four stocks. These four stocks are Bitcoin miner stocks that have been around since the last Bitcoin halving. And I think it's very interesting to kind of look into in terms of what happened for them during the last halving around May 11, 2020, and try to extrapolate in terms of what's happening now that we're running into halving in just 11 days in April 20th, 2024. It's a little bit interesting too in terms of the dynamics because during the last halving is going to be around like May, right here, right? Before that, you have a whole year of just price just kind of going down, which is very, very, very traumatic for a lot of people who were holding the stock at that point. And then compound with that, you also end up having a black swan event, which is COVID, around March of 2020, with shutdowns, deflationary, talks. The economic cycle has been shut down. Big giant capitulation candle right around here. But then you end up having the halving that happened around May. It's really tough to say whether or not it's because it increased liquidity due to the Fed, really lowering rates down to zero, or is it because of halving, the overhang for halving is kind of, over. Regardless of the reason, before halving, it was actually, quite negative, if you will. After halving, there seems to be a little bit more of like a positive catalyst over here, either between that or Fed printing money, I don't know, but it seems like halving is a little bit contrary to what the conventional wisdom would be, where halving means you're having the rewards that miners could get from mining, right? So technically, wouldn't it be bearish? Wouldn't the revenue actually kind of go by half? There might be a lot of volatility of setting the news at this time too for Bitcoin. So wouldn't that necessarily be the case where you actually end up having a drop after halving? Like, that doesn't make sense, right? But it's just one of those things that may not make sense until after it happened. Maybe there's a little bit of overhang in terms of negative catalyst that comes in, and after negative catalyst has happened, then we're kind of leaving the news behind us. We've been kind of maybe pricing it in for a whole year over here. Maybe we're kind of pricing it in for about 4 months over here. And then halving comes, perhaps the negative catalyst is going to be lifted. That's one possibility. Certainly seems like this is a consolidation over here. It's very, very similar to consolidation over here. And it's a little bit weird too, because Bitcoin halving hasn't even happened for this cycle, and you already have a pretty nice bull cycle over here for like a whole year, as opposed to last time you have like a continued bear cycle like a whole year before that. So I think there's a little bit of discrepancy between this cycle versus last cycle for somebody like Mara. But that's okay. The key thing here is that halving could potentially be a positive catalyst. Either that, or there's just going to be a wait in terms of we might be like a little bit closer to here, actually. Maybe there's a little bit of a wait for another second catalyst that's going to come to give you some big giant green candles over here that we had in November 2020. Maybe we're actually not so much waiting for liquidity from halving, or that halving is actually not that big of a deal. Maybe we're actually waiting for something else to happen before Bitcoin miners actually pump up, because Bitcoin miners are actually small cap stocks. And over here in November 2020, something big happened to IWM. I'm going to show you towards the end. Maybe we're waiting for the same pool of liquidity to come from small cap stocks in general, small cap stock indexes in general, before a very nice bullish continuation. The one more thing to consider is that these are stocks, and they are having a lot of dilution compared to Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a very, very fixed supply, and in terms of exchanges, they're actually running out of Bitcoin. Like there's actually not that much left on exchanges because there's such a high demand for them. Whereas these stocks, they do have dilution, and there's going to be a lot more supply that needs to be eaten through before bullish continuation. But I do think that these Bitcoin miners are going to run because of a couple of reasons. One is they're a lot more small in market cap. I mean, Mara is like 4 or 5 billion market cap, as well as Bitcoin is like 1.3 trillion. So it actually takes a lot less money to move a stock like Mara compared to moving Bitcoin, as long as the supply has been absorbed. And right now, I think we're still kind of absorb a little bit more of the supply that was kind of left over here, as well as maybe some of the supply that's been kind of left over recently by dilution, which happens. It's also a lot to do with the technical too, in terms of consolidation here. I'm going to show you a few indicators. I'm not sure actually whether or not this pre-halving event, the pre-halving look right here, has too much correlation in terms of the last halving, to be completely honest with you. It looks more like this consolidation here. It looks more like the consolidation over here before the big green candle over here. I wonder if we're going to get the same source of liquidity here. And again, I'm going to show you IW chart here in a second. Before I do that, let's put a few indicators as to why I think this cycle over here at this point is similar to over here. One indicator is the Ichimoku cloud. Gives you a couple lines here. One line it gives you is the Tenkan, which is the red here, which is the leading line. They also give you a lagging line, which is the Kijun over here, which is the blue line over here. Around the area consolidation over here, you end up having a bullish cross over here. Guess what also happened a couple months ago? You also had a bullish cross over here back in February 2024. Price is underneath both of these lines. That's okay. I did that for about 2 months over here before a big bounce up. Price is currently underneath both of those lines over here. I think this might be okay because you did have a bullish cross here that's telling you that it's been, reasonably bullish here long enough for something to potentially flip in terms of a trend for a longer term. Last time it flipped over here, price continued to go up for about a whole year. This time it just kind of flipped a couple of months ago. It could potentially go up for another 12 to 18 months. We'll see. But it is certainly experiencing some consolidation over here, like it did over here. Before that, big volume buy, increasing volume buy, consolidation, right? Decreasing volume. Next thing you know, after consolidation happened, big volume buy to push the price up a lot higher. What happened over here? Increasing volume buying, decreasing volume selling over here, increasing volume to make another leg up over here. Right now, what is it doing? It's consolidating. If anything, it's kind of pointing down a little bit, decreasing volume over here. Very similar setup as it was last time based on Ichimoku Cloud, based on volume analysis. And if you also want to look at the Bollinger Band too, also very similar setup over here compared to here. This big green candle right here pushed the price up back above the 20-month moving average, and it flattens it, right? And over here a few months ago, these couple of green candles over here, again, push price back above the 20-month moving average pretty convincingly, and it flattens the 20-month moving average, and now it's kind of helping kind of point up here a little bit, right? Very similar look as you do over here on a 20-month moving average over here on the last cycle. I think we might be at a very, very similar space over here. Now, Bollinger Band initially kind of expanded a little bit here, and it's kind of crawling up a little bit now because of consolidation. A very similar look also happened last time, right around here during this consolidation before further breaking out. I do wonder whether or not it's building up a bunch of energy for it to kind of push up higher. It's just waiting for some additional catalyst, or it's just waiting for some other sources of liquidity to kind of come in to kind of help push the price up above to eat up all of the rest of the supply before going up a lot higher. Now, another indicator I also want to pull up is the Black Hat L3 Banker Fund Flow indicator. You can see over here during this consolidation period over here, you can see that there's an increase in wealth inflow over here. And we're also seeing a very, very similar thing over here. Now, price kind of went sideways, everything went down a little bit during this increase in wealth inflow. Over here, price kind of went sideways, if anything kind of went down a little bit during this increased period of wealth inflow. There's a lot of correlate between here and here, which is just precipitating a big, potentially big upward moves, as you might see over here, that might end up transpiring over here as well. So very fascinating. This certainly looks more like this rather than, like the pre-halving type look tomorrow. But it certainly has some correlate from the last cycle. So we'll see whether or not it kind of plays out. Maybe the Bitcoin miners are more going to follow the liquidity from small cap stocks rather than following, what Bitcoin halving is necessarily going to do. But it certainly seems like after Bitcoin halving, it seems to be more of a positive catalyst. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to pull up some weekly chart here, just kind of show you something a little bit more interesting. If I'm going to pull up the bull market support band, I still think that this right here, even though it's kind of like have a little bit of low volume, false breakdown here a little bit so far, I still think that this move right here looked very, very similar to this move right here. Big acceleration, correct sideways over here, have like a little bit of a couple peaks right here. The band continues to kind of slope up. It did flatten a little bit before slope up, right? A big breakout over here. It does look like it's, kind of trying to flatten a little bit, maybe before it slopes back up and keep going up higher. There's a lot of correlate between these two, and if you look at also the volume signature, like big giant volume breakout over here, right? All these gaps over here came back and test to fill these gaps on low volume. and then followed by a big volume breakout. Same thing happened over here, big volume breakout, and right now you're really seeing all of this kind of like low volume, not low volume, but declining volume selling, maybe precipitating for increasing volume, pick back up and going up further. That's kind of what I'm seeing so far. Is I'm seeing a little bit of a very similar correlate between these two areas. We never really know though. But anyway, been talking about Mora a lot. I want to share with you what I also see on another chart, which is RIOT. RIOT is a little bit more interesting. Again, remember what I was saying, the last Bitcoin halving was around May of 2020. Around May of 2020, even pre-halving, you have big giant green candle over here, which is a little bit bullish, engulfing from the last one. So for RIOT, the Bitcoin halving tend to be a very bullish event and precipitated a pretty big bullish candle over here. Now, followed by this big volume breakout over here, you do have very similar sideways action over here compared to what Mara did as well around the same time, until this big giant green candle here. Again, it's November 2020. Very interesting why it's all November 2020. But this is a big giant green candle over here for RIOT that also happened in Mara. And it tends to be correlate more with like small cap stocks pumping at that particular period of time. I'm going to show you here in a little bit. I do think that this period over here, we're just kind of consolidating here closer for a year now, maybe a little bit more similar to this period over here for about 5 or 6 months, where it's just been kind of consolidating. The volume signature looked very similar. It's just been kind of going up, even though it's probably just kind of consolidating sideways. And when you have like these red candles over here, volume is down. It looks like it's kind of doing the same thing where the buying volume is just kind of pointing up over here. Whenever you have these red volume candles, they're kind of going down. Very, very similar look to these two, but for whatever reason, the consolidation period over here for RIOT is a little bit longer. Maybe because there's a lot more supply over here to be, taken care of this time. Maybe this cycle is just going to be slower, but more steadier compared to the last cycle. I don't know exactly what happens, but it does look like these two kind of correlate. Now I'm going to pull up some of the other indicators to kind of look at here too. The Ichimoku cloud. You have a cross over here that happened after this big giant green candle. You did have a little bit of bullish cross over here, but it looks like it might be at risk for having a little bit of bearish cross again, isn't it? So I do think that it does take a little bit more bullish momentum and try and push the price up higher before bullish cross happen. I do wonder whether or not this look right here is very, very similar to this look right here, and that it might end up working out in a very, very similar manner. We'll see, right? But that's just one indicator here. The other indicator is the Bollinger Band. Again, very similar look over here. In terms of the 20-month moving average, just like slowly kind of curling up, and it did have a little bit of like, a downtrend right here. It did have a little bit of downtrend right here. Right now, it's kind of back testing the 20-month moving average. I mean, the month's not over. I wouldn't call this a breakdown. Even a breakdown probably needs another month to confirm the true breakdown, right? But it does look like the 20-month moving average is kind of crawling up here. Bollinger Band actually is a little bit contracting over here during this consolidation period. And it's just like the Bollinger Band here is a little bit contracting during this consolidation period. It's kind of fascinating in terms of how these two moves actually do look quite similar. So I do wonder whether or not it's going to follow by some pretty similar moves going upwards. There are some things here that are suggesting that could be the case. They want me to pay. I'm not going to pay. There are something here that's going to make me think that's going to be the case. One thing is, over here during this consolidation period, there's an increase in whale inflow. During this consolidation period, even though it looks like it might be sideways, but overall there's an increase in whale inflow as well. So there's a lot of these kind of consolidation over here. It does make me wonder whether or not this is just like a reaccumulation range. Like this is an accumulation range over here. This is just reaccumulation over here before going up higher. Certainly looks like it based on volume signature, because buy volume is up, sell volume is down. We'll see. It certainly seems like there's a lot more similarities over here at this spot right here compared to over here, rather than talking about post-halving. Regardless though, even the month before halving for RIOT, it was a pretty bullish engulfing candle right here that engulfs the candle over here from March 2020 during COVID shutdowns. It does make you wonder whether whether or not this is all about liquidity rather than Bitcoin halving when it comes to these Bitcoin miners. It does make you wonder, doesn't it? Anyway, I showed you the Ichimoku cloud, I showed you the Bollinger Band. If you want to look at the bull market support band, I can also pull that up here. This also looks like a prolonged consolidation as opposed to over here. because price just been kind of consolidating, oscillating around the bull market support band. Over here, it just kind of bounced and went up. Over here, it's just consolidating. So there's a little bit of difference between here, and there's not really a correlate here on the last cycle either. But the closest I can get based on looking at monthly indicators was that this area here may be more of a correlate over here compared to, like pre-halving, because it just didn't really look quite just like that. Anyway, that was Riot. Just want to share you some of the thoughts here. There's another stock that's been around during the last Bitcoin halving, which is Bitfarms. Bitfarms is a little bit tricky because it didn't really IPO until like August 2019. And whenever stock IPO, usually end up being a little bit overvalued, and there used to be a lot of hype, associated with that. So sure enough, price just kind of tanked down here for like over a year, right? And then around March 2020, you are going to have a big giant competition candle over here as well. Whereas the halving happened in May, you did have a little bit of a wake up, maybe, because there's a little bit of increase in buying pressure here temporarily, but it's still not strong enough to, to sustain a bull trend because of how bad the downtrend over here is until something happened, until November of 2020. I keep going to November 2020 here. Big giant green candle that really kind of, changed the trend up here. So far, this is different. Halving hasn't happened yet. We already have a bull trend that's been happening for about a whole year or more, right? And there's not really a whole lot of correlate here compared to over here either, so it's not going to be very, very helpful in terms of looking at what happened during the past. If I pull up some of the indicator, the Bollinger Band is not going to be very helpful for you. But this does look very, very similar to like Mara and Riot. It actually looks more similar to Mara than Riot because it looks like it's just a breakout of this horizontal zone right here with a back test over here around the $2 range. That's what it looks like. And this is also happening in terms of looking at volume signature. This breakout that happened over here on this horizontal range happened in super giant volume. And the back test here happened in declining volume. So this is actually a pretty bullish setup before potentially further bullish continuation. And then in addition to that, you're also seeing there's a little bit of an increase in upslope of the 20-month moving average. And price tend to seem to have been hugging this upper Bollinger Band for quite some time. So there are a lot of things that are positive going for Bitfarms in terms of longer term trend compared to Riot actually looks a little bit more bullish. But unfortunately, we don't really have a good correlate compared to before. Now, the best correlate I have for you is that, after this big red candle here from March 2020, pre-halving was actually a little bit green. And if anything, post-halving, it didn't really go down that much further. If anything, it was just kind of go sideways here a little bit before a big giant pump over here. So for Bitfarms, it's not necessarily a bad negative catalyst, like we just end up plummeting after halving. It didn't end up doing that, right? And again, it could be more reflective of the liquidity condition at that point rather than halving. But it does seem like it's not really that bad of a negative catalyst. So we'll see. The other thing I wanted to show you, again, if you look at Ichimoku Cloud, you have a little bit of a bullish cross over here. But price had also been underneath of both of these lines over here. So a little bit similar to Mara. And it's also kind of consolidating sideways here a little bit, forming a little bit of a bull flag. If you look at the L3 banker fund flow, it's also very, very similar to Mara, where price just kind of went sideways. But you have like this big giant, whale inflow over here, where while volume just kind of going down, looks like whales are coming in, while price went sideways to downwards, and volume just kind of been consolidating downwards. That's a pretty favorable setup for Bitfarm moving forward. Unfortunately, I just don't have that much correlate in terms of halving here, but that's okay. Last one I want to look at is HUT. HUT's been around since the last halving here as well. Again, last halving was around May of 2020, right? Very, very interesting that's happening is that May of 2020 actually was a very, very bullish month for HUT. It did not serve as a negative catalyst at all. If anything, it created this big giant green candle over here. But it got rejected over here. What did it get rejected by? Well, it got rejected by the 20-month moving average, which is sloping down right here. Again, like Bitfarm, HUT didn't really start to come around until March 2018, whenever things IPO generally is thought to be a little bit more overvalued, needs some time for correction. Correction can happen for like a year or two, right? Next thing you know, because of this big giant downtrend over here, it drags the moving average, like a 20-month moving average, to drag it down. And when that happens, serves as pretty important resistance. Reject it right here, once, twice, 3 times. Maybe you can argue even 4 or 5 times over here. Before, guess what happened? November 2020. You keep going back to November 2020. Green candle, push above, turn the 20-month moving average upwards, created a bull trend that lasted for about a whole year. November 2020, again, right? But for HUT, the key point is that post-halving is actually a positive catalyst here. I would say that this cycle actually looked very, very similar to last cycle. It does have a little bit of like this 1, 2, and 3 look to it, doesn't it? 1, 2, and 3 look. You have these tweezer bottoms over here, 3 tweezer bottoms, 3 tweezer bottoms. There's a possibility where HUT is bottoming. There's no confirmation, but this look right here, the flattening of the 20-month moving average, this look like it's doing the same thing over here. So HUT may be a little bit of a laggard, because even for last cycle, it was lagging behind MAR and RIOT by quite a few months. But in this cycle, looks like could certainly be another period of time where HUT could be serving as a little bit of a laggard again. I don't know. I'm still wondering whether or not the liquidity is going to come in pretty soon from like small cap stocks to help push HUT up higher. But the point is that this consolidation over here looks very similar to this consolidation over here. Even though this is like whatever we're having right now, all this stuff is pre-halving. Post-halving actually turned out to be a pretty decent giant green candle over here. You can argue, I wonder whether or not this downtrend over here, this is similar to this downtrend over here, and this big giant green candle over here is going to end up pushing price convincingly above the 20-month moving average and continue to actually push price up a lot higher. I do not know the answer to that. There's no confirmation that it's bottomed, although the flattening of the 20-month moving average is a little bit encouraging. Nevertheless, the key thing is it's not a negative catalyst based on last cycle. A lot of things go into it, but I'm just showing you the candle. I'm just showing you the timing in terms of halving. You would think there's a negative catalyst, but not necessarily. So, I keep talking about November 2020. What happened in November 2020? November 2020 is when IWM had this big giant green candle right here. After going sideways for about 3 months, hit a big giant green candle right here. Right now we've kind of been going sideways here for a little while, haven't we? I wonder whether or not the liquidity is going to come and it's going to end up potentially pump IWM up higher. When IWM pumps higher, IWM is the Russell 2000 small cap index, by the way. It's an ETF fund that represents that, I should say. If it comes, it could end up pumping Bitcoin miners up a lot higher. There are a couple of things in terms of why I think it's going to come soon. If you look at the Black Hat Fund Flow chart right here, price sideways, well inflow increasing. Price sideways here, well inflow increasing, right? So there's been a lot of energy built up by whale inflow and institutions down here too with the IWM. And when you have this kind of discrepancy, this is actually a little bit more like a bullish divergence, if you will. Price sideways, well inflow going in, increasing. It makes me wonder whether or not it's building up a lot of pressure for you to kind of break above a certain level over here. It's looking like there's a very similar correlate between the two here, doesn't it? You look at the Bollinger Band, I was just showing you that. If anything, it looks like we're actually getting to a point where we're a little bit bullish here. We actually already started having the expansion of Bollinger Band here, so there could be potentially some more impulsive price action that's going to come over the next couple of months or so to push IWM higher. It doesn't always have to be like this big giant green god candle over here. It could be a little bit smaller candle, maybe a few green candles kind of stack up to expand the Bollinger Band up higher. And the Bollinger Band is also expanding, a lot of price to go up higher. I wonder whether or not that's going to be the case. We'll see what happens. Another thing to look at is the Ichimoku Cloud. Very similar outlook over here. 3 months sideways over here, 3 months sideways over here. kind of bounced on the top of the Ichimoku cloud. This one already bounced on the top of the Ichimoku cloud. Maybe this cycle is just going to be a lot slower compared to the last one. Maybe we won't get this big giant green candle over here, but we might get a few consecutive, bullish candles over here, allowing liquidity to come into small cap stocks, which is probably going to end up floating into Bitcoin miners too. That's kind of what I'm seeing. Anyway, it's been a little bit of a fun video to talk about halving, talk about where we are in the cycle compared to the last cycle. The last cycle was kind of thrown off by COVID, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But regardless, it's still some pretty interesting comparison, between the two. And I also want to show you that, Bitcoin halving is not necessarily that bearish of an event. It's just something to consider, right? I also wanted to bring up, November 2020, big giant green candle over here, right? What happened in November of 2020? You also have a big giant green candle here in Bitcoin as well. So I'm not saying that it's all depending on IWM. I'm saying that it's a combination of bullishness between IWM and Bitcoin. You have two catalysts that needs to happen before Bitcoin miners to pump potentially. And then on top of that, you also may have some overhanging in terms of what halving could do to these miner companies. We'll see what happens after halving. It's coming in 11 days. We'll see what happens, okay? Thank you for listening. Have a good one. Bye.